So my pure consciousness event, boy, I was in a yoga room at the time. I had been practicing, this was 2000. I had begun meditating and practicing yoga in 98, but not daily. 2000 is when I really developed a daily practice. But I wasn't yet familiar with yoga philosophy or yoga psychology. I'd done some bhakti, some chanting, but I hadn't read any of the texts that underlie really any of the reasons why we would do the practices. And I was leaving the yoga room. This was July of 2000, and I had what is known in the religious studies literature as a pure consciousness event, which was basically just a flash. It was a flash of light. Lasted probably about a second. Very brief.
Wow.
But in it, all subject-object distinctions broke down. And the awareness that consciousness is all there is was the knowing, was the event itself.
Wow.
And yeah, it radically changed my life. There was really no going back from there. It didn't eradicate all the anxiety and stress that I had in my nervous system, or it didn't eradicate all the patterns in my mind, all my own, I'll say neurotic, patterning coming up through Euro-American culture and in a family that has some mental illness and alcoholism. So it didn't take away anything that had really deeply impacted my life with binds and complexes, as we say, in depth psychology. But at the same time, there was no going back from that knowledge that consciousness is all there is.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, how would you integrate that experience back? And I guess that in some ways you kind of explained it, like you didn't, like it didn't make it easy for you. Like it's like you still had all these things that you still had to work through. You had all the life lessons and all the experiences that you had. And I was always, I guess I was fascinated about it. Like, did that just leave you? But apparently it didn't. It just, they kind of gave you the look through the window. You were Dorothy. You got behind the curtain. You looked around, and you kind of saw what was going on. And then it's like, okay, we're going to close that up and then deal with it. And
Right.
that's what it kind of seemed like. So, like, how did you integrate that? Like, I mean, most people, like I've heard, like close to near death experiences have something similar to that, and they have a hard time integrating back into, I guess, society in general. Like, how did you find that process for yourself?
Oh, it was definitely very challenging. I didn't even talk to anybody about it for about the first 2 years. I just tried to sort of sit on it myself. But again, because it didn't eradicate all the distress, let's just say within my own nervous system, I was still sitting in all that distress. But yet I knew that consciousness was all there was. So from that moment on, my life until this day is the marrying of, well, if consciousness is all there is, then what the hell is going on in this very complex state of humanity, especially the suffering and the injustice and the inequality and the, environmental collapse. Like, if consciousness is all there is, then why are we seemingly so blind to that?
Yeah, like,
And yeah, so it's a 20 plus year journey now. And I do, my practice is called transformational coaching. I work with people one-on-one, but it's a process of integration. That's what I do with all my clients every day is work towards integrating the patterns of the mind that are bound in suffering and in distress into this field of pure consciousness.
so that being said, I mean, how did we get that? How do we get so stuck? Like, where did it really start for us? And I mean, with humanity in general, it just seems like we kind of do this cyclic thing. We kind of get a little bit there, and then we just fall back into these patterns again. We kind of get out of there, and we fall back in these patterns again. How do we get stuck? And is there a pathway out of it?
Those are great questions, and a historian I am not.
Okay.
But clearly, when we look at certain civilizations, I mean, the yoga tradition is what I draw heavily from. So my doctorate is in depth psychology, but I really do an East-West blend because I've that event happened in a yoga room, and I actually started studying yoga and depth psychology roughly around the same time. So my practice is a blend of those two disciplines predominantly. So, you have the history of India. It's an ancient civilization, and yoga was developed over thousands of years by hundreds of thousands of people. So it's not just one figurehead. If you're familiar with the Upanishads, which is one of the philosophical texts underlying yoga, they don't even sign the document. They don't even say, this person wrote it. There's no names associated to it. So they've really understood that this knowledge is structured in consciousness. That's their metaphysic, that consciousness is all there is. And then yoga, the beautiful way to talk about it is through the seer and the seen.
Okay.
So again, I'm not a historian. Where we broke off from that, I don't know, but I can tell you, as somebody who grew up Catholic, I feel that you did too.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir, sister.
Okay. Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel most confident talking about, my own experiences, but I will, I guess, expand that to Christianity overall. But again, being very clear that Catholicism is what I was most exposed to. There's so much terror in that system of thought. Here you have a man teaching love, teaching about social justice, and he's murdered for those teachings. So in a sense, right, Jesus, you could say, is equivalent perhaps to the Buddha or Patanjali. He was a yogi. He was teaching things that yoga teaches. Me and my father are one. Consciousness is all there is, right? But yet, a lot of us who are born into these traditions, we're exposed to this image of a man up on a cross with blood and, thorns around his head. And it's a system of thought that is very terrifying. Now, yoga is a mind-body practice. The terror must come out of the system. The nervous system is really the key indicator. The body keeps the score. So whereas yoga is encouraging and inviting everybody to trust and deeply have faith in the field that supports, the Christian culture is very different. Heaven is somewhere else. We murder our people. Don't talk about love. Don't talk about justice. So I feel like that's one way. Again, it's not deep history. It's only like 2,000 years ago, but I definitely see it. And look we dated time from that moment. So I think that's a very important cultural complex to start with. Of course, we can keep going back in history, but that's one that certainly has deeply impacted most of Euro-American culture.